15 physiotherapists walked into that hospital room, and 15 physiotherapists walked back out, some of them crying before they even reached the elevator. One woman lasted less than a single shift. She packed her bag, signed her resignation letter in the hallway, and never came back. The man behind that door wasn't violent. He wasn't cruel in the way people expected. He was something far more difficult to understand. He was a man who had lost everything that once made him feel like himself, and somewhere along the way, he decided that if he couldn't have his old life back, no one would ever get close enough to see the man he'd become. His name was Liam Baxton, and before the accident, he was untouchable. Before you go any further, ask yourself this. If you spent your whole life being the strongest person in every room, and then one morning you woke up and couldn't even sit up on your own, how long do you think it would take before you started pushing people away too? Keep that question in the back of your mind, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why it matters so much. But before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're enjoying stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Liam Baxton built his company from a rented garage into one of the most respected engineering firms in the country. He worked 18-hour days for over a decade, and before he even realized it, work had become the only place where he truly felt safe. He didn't take vacations. He didn't really have friends outside the office. The one thing he allowed himself, the one piece of freedom he protected fiercely, was flying. His father had taught him when he was 16, in a small two-seater helicopter that rattled every time the wind picked up. Up there, nobody needed anything from him. Up there, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man in the sky. So when his doctor told him he needed to slow down before his body forced him to, Liam finally agreed to take 1 week off. A quiet mountain resort, far from meetings and phone calls. On his second morning there, he decided to take his helicopter up for what should have been a routine flight over the valley. He remembers the engine sounding fine. He remembers the mountains looking exactly the way they always did. Then, without warning, a light he'd never seen before flashed across the dashboard. Once, then stayed on. After that, everything dissolved into silence. What happened next would only be pieced together through the memories of everyone else. Nearly 3 weeks later, Liam opened his eyes to the sound of hospital monitors and a life he no longer recognized. The first thing he understood, before anyone even explained it to him, was that his legs would not move the way he asked them to. The second thing he understood was that the life he had built, the one built entirely on control, independence, and the belief that he'd never need anyone, was gone. What followed were months of anger that no nurse, no therapist, and no well-meaning relative could get through. He wasn't trying to be cruel to the people trying to help him. Inside, he was drowning. But asking for help felt even more frightening than the silence. Then, on an ordinary Monday morning, a 26-year-old physiotherapy intern named Brittany Whitefield walked into his room, carrying nothing more than a clipboard and a calm confidence no one else seemed to have. She had heard about the 15 physiotherapists who had come before her. Everyone in that hospital had. Her supervisor even warned her, half joking, that she was walking into a lost cause. Brittany didn't say much back. She just nodded, picked up her folder, and went in anyway. Now think about this. If you were in Brittany's position, knowing that 15 physiotherapists before you had already given up, would you have taken that assignment? Or would you have found a polite reason to ask for someone else's patient instead? Give that some thought, because Brittany's answer to that question is the reason this story exists at all. Liam barely looked at her when she introduced herself. He assumed she would leave within the hour, just like the others. Instead, she sat down, opened her folder, and said something no one else in that hospital had dared to say to him directly. She told him that ignoring her wasn't going to make his legs work again. The room froze. A nurse standing near the door actually stopped what she was doing. Nobody spoke to Liam Baxton like that, not his doctors, not his own family. But Brittany didn't flinch. And for reasons Liam couldn't explain even to himself, he didn't ask her to leave. Over the following weeks, something in him started to shift, slowly and unevenly, the way real change usually happens. Brittany refused to feed him if he was capable of holding a spoon himself. She refused to let him quit halfway through an exercise just because his arms were shaking. Her favorite word, the one she repeated more than any other, was simply try. There were mornings he cursed at her. There were mornings he refused to get out of bed at all. But she kept showing up, day after day, and almost without realizing it. The man who had driven away every therapist before her slowly stopped fighting the one person who refused to walk away. Just as Liam's recovery began showing real signs of progress, something far more unsettling started happening around him. Something that had nothing to do with his physical condition. His medication schedule changed without any explanation from his doctors. Pages disappeared from his exercise plan. On 2 separate occasions, the brakes on his wheelchair were found loosened in a way that could have caused a serious fall. Hospital staff blamed clerical errors and short staffing. Brittany didn't believe that for a second. She began quietly photographing his charts after every visit, keeping her own private record of what was supposed to be happening versus what actually was. One night, working late, she noticed something on the hallway logs that didn't sit right with her. Someone had entered Liam's room well after midnight, according to the nurse's sign-in sheet. When she asked to check the hallway security footage from that night, she was told it simply wasn't available. No explanation was given. That was the moment Brittany stopped assuming this was bad luck and started wondering if someone, somewhere, did not want Liam Baxton to fully recover. A few weeks later, going through boxes she had never had the emotional strength to open before, Brittany discovered something she was never supposed to find. The boxes belonged to her mother, Helen Whitefield, who had passed away several years earlier after a long illness. Before she became ill, Helen had worked as an aviation safety engineer for one of the country's leading independent aircraft certification firms. Her job was to inspect helicopter components and approve them for use before they entered service. Inside one of the boxes, Brittany found old notebooks, technical reports, and a small flash drive her mother had clearly hidden rather than simply stored. The documents revealed that years earlier, Helen had uncovered a network of counterfeit helicopter components being supplied to aviation companies across the country. The parts looked genuine on paper, but were never built to survive real-world stress. Helen refused to approve them and filed detailed reports warning that they posed a deadly risk. Instead of being praised, she was pressured to stay quiet. When she refused, her reputation was destroyed, and she was quietly forced out of the industry. One page, written in her own handwriting, made Brittany stop breathing for a moment. It read, "If these parts remain in circulation, someone's life will eventually depend on a lie." Attached to that page was a photograph of the exact helicopter model Liam had been flying the day of his crash. Here's something to consider. Imagine finding out that your own mother had warned about a danger like this years before it happened, and that no one had listened to her. How would you feel, knowing the truth had been sitting quietly in a box in your own home the entire time? That's exactly where Brittany stood that night, and from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. Around the same time, as Liam's memory slowly returned during therapy, one detail kept resurfacing that had never made sense to him. Just before his flight that day, a mechanic he did not recognize had approached his helicopter, someone not wearing the resort's usual uniform. Liam remembered asking him if he was new. The man had only offered a calm smile and said he was just helping out. That mechanic was never seen again after the crash. When Brittany later checked the resort's official employment records, there was no record of any such person ever having worked there at all. For days, Brittany barely slept. Every document led to another report. Every report pointed to another missing signature, another altered inspection, another person who had suddenly left the company after asking too many questions. The deeper she dug, the clearer one terrifying truth became. This hadn't been one mistake. It had been a carefully protected system. Following the trail her mother had uncovered years earlier, Brittany traced supplier records, inspection reports, and financial transactions until they all pointed to one person. Liam's longtime chief operating officer, a man Liam had trusted for more than a decade. Rather than creating the counterfeit parts scheme, he had knowingly brought those dangerous components into Liam's company's aircraft division through corrupt suppliers because they generated enormous profits. When questions were raised, he buried inspection reports, silenced anyone who got too close to the truth, and made sure Helen Whitefield's warnings disappeared with her career. Liam's helicopter had never been meant to survive that failure. And when Liam lived against every expectation, keeping him away from the company became the next step in protecting the scheme. With Brittany's support, Liam made the decision to confront the situation directly rather than staying silent out of fear or self-protection. During a carefully recorded private conversation, Liam got the man to reveal enough contradictions and admissions to trigger a criminal investigation. The evidence, combined with Helen Whitefield's original reports from years earlier, was enough to expose the entire scheme. The company's board removed the chief operating officer from his position, and for the first time since her career was destroyed, Helen Whitefield's name was formally and publicly cleared. 6 months later, Liam stood in front of a newly opened rehabilitation center bearing a name that meant everything to both him and Brittany: the Helen Whitefield Center for Recovery and Aviation Safety. He walked in that day using a cane, not perfectly, but every single step had been earned through months of work that no one could have done for him. Brittany was waiting for him near the entrance. He told her simply that she had taught him how to stand again. She looked at him and said that he had stood up the moment he chose to keep fighting instead of giving up. Sometimes the hardest thing a person will ever face isn't a broken body. It's a broken spirit, quietly convincing them that they are no longer worth showing up for. And sometimes, the person who truly changes your life isn't the one who tells you everything will be fine. It's the one who refuses to let you surrender, even when you are absolutely certain that giving up is easier. 15 physiotherapists walked away from Liam Baxton. It only took one person to remind him that standing isn't just about your legs. It's about refusing to give up. Before you go, tell us honestly in the comments. If you were Brittany, would you have accepted that assignment knowing 15 specialists had already walked away before you? And if you were Liam, do you think you could have let someone in? Or would you have kept pushing everyone away too? We would genuinely love to read your thoughts below. If this story moved you even a little, please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with someone who still believes people are capable of change. And if this story stayed with you, don't miss the next one here on Empire Tales Studio, because sometimes the greatest betrayals begin with the people we trust the most.